or or is their signature as witnesses apply to the entire document and therefore indicate, yes, that testifies that that individual is indeed a Kohen. Okay? So that was part of yesterday's Gemara. Okay? And at the time, okay, what happened was that Jack Prince was there, and Jack, okay, Ted, you were there? No, yesterday afternoon, tomorrow?
No.
Okay, so that's why I'm telling everybody here in the doc. So Jack Prince raised a story where in Muncie, a Maaseh Shahaya, a true incident where there was somebody who was adopted, okay, and okay, and in that situation, he pointed out that whoever it was, okay, was adopted by a particular family.
I know the story.
Oh, you know the story, okay? And so what then transpired, was that a relative of that family made Aliyah in Eretz Yisrael. If I don't have the story right, you'll correct me. And they happened to find proof that the particular family who always thought they were Israelites were actually Kohanim. Okay?
And I know the family too.
Okay. So the
story I know from the family, but I grew up together with them.
Okay. So in this situation, and nobody asked anything about it, okay? But I was hesitant a little bit to go into it in additional detail because we had people present at the daf who only come on Shabbos afternoon, who are interested in the learning, and we may have precisely a question there about somebody who is a Kohen and who adopted, and whether the youngster should be considered a Kohen or not. Okay? So I didn't know if that was going to come. Well, Bob was there, so Bob knows who I'm referring to, right?
I know who you're referring to.
You know too. Okay. Okay. So
I listen. In order to not to make machlok, this is I'll show bias. It's a point of view. What you're saying to
right.
let it go with that. And the timing is, and I'm going to say it at the final end, what that is. The more of the Asa has to decide what he wants to do.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
Isn't it also, it's a question of embarrassing the person?
Right. All of these are issues.
Yeah.
That's right. I was just concerned that yesterday at the DAF, having made that, not that it was inappropriate for Jack to share that story with us, okay, but I was concerned that it might lead to beyond that. Yes, Harvey.
Someone was the reverse.
Oh, yeah.
One day he walked in and he said, wait a minute, I just found out I'm a Cohen. And they checked it out. They had gone back to check the savers and everything like that. And the rabbi went back and said, yeah, he is. All these years, he never knew he was. This was reversed. Then what do you do?
Yeah. Marty, you wanted a comment.
The young man, when you split up from the radio, the father's name is not the same as the adopted father. So they obviously, I think, looked into it when they adopted.
I would hope.
I'll give you one better, Rabbi.
I would hope.
It's my own family.
Yeah.
My wife's sister got married.
Yeah.
And he went through the war as an orphan.
Yeah.
So forth. You know what? He never had any education. Finally, after the war, the family got together. He got married. he went to Canada. She met him there. They got married, and then they came to America. So, who was left over from the whole family was a brother and a sister. So, what's a Duncan? My first nephew was born. Technically, it's my wife's sister's son. And by the bris, they said, and the brother in the back hollers out, Halevi. He never knew.
Never knew. I believe it because I've had it in a congregation I was in. A grandfather had heard that that in a town back in Europe, he took his grandsons with him to go back to Europe to see where he had been as a child, and found the cemetery where his mishpacha was buried there in Europe, found the matzeva, and they had thought they were Israelites, and discovered they were on the matzeva. It said they were a Levi. Okay, and in honor of that, the gentleman was comfortable financially. He restored the entire cemetery, matzevas and everything, fence, for that community back in Europe.
And my Shiraz brother was so sad. He said, gee, I thought I was going to have a bed. I know.
In Curacao, when kids lived there was never had a big menu. To get together, you had 13, 15 people. That was great. Some guy walked in who came every 6 weeks or something.
Yeah.
And he walked in and announced, he said, I had a DNA test taken. I found out I'm a Kohen. And the rabbi, who was a young rabbi at that time, just immediately said, we don't accept that. That was it.
Wow. All right. All of this really comes back into our Gemara in a moment, as we'll do our names, and then we'll pick up. Okay. A year of learning, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren of Toby Paris, Toby Bad Yisrael Dov in her memory, friends of Nina Monester, Nechama Hasna Bad Yitzchak Aharon, many friends of Stephen Vigdala, Zechen Nishmat Simcha Melech Mameir Leib Halevi, friends of Marcy Kurtz in memory of her great niece, Leah Bracha. Isaac and Evelyn Blacho in memory of his sister, Chaya Rachel Bas Eser. Week of learning, Judy Iger in memory of her father-in-law, Shlomo Michal Ben Aharon, Sid Paris in memory of his wife, Sarah Tova Bad Yisrael Dov, Jack Gilman in memory of his mother, Elka Bad Yeshayahu, Alan Blumenfeld in memory of his father, Gershon Ben Achaver Pinchas Cohen, David Mindel Cheslow in memory of his mother, Bela Bas Meir, Sam and Shifra Coleman in memory of his father, Yaakov Ben Shmuel, a month of learning. Oh, sorry, read it the wrong order. Jill and Perry Meltzer in memory of Jill's mother, Bela Bat Avram, Perry's father, David Ben Fishel Alevi, Mark Linder in memory of his mother, Yonah Bat Zalman Leib, Rabbi Isaac Shmerla in memory of his wife, Menya Sima Bat Yitzchak Isaac, friends of Marilyn Shmerla in her memory, Menya Sima Bat Yitzchak Isaac. That is it for today. Also Refuah Shlema, Peretz Chemes Ben Yaakov Yitzchak, and others. Shema Heaven Aliyah, Crank Rafia, Velti Yeshua Shema Tliya, Kol Bnei Israel, good gebenched you.
Okay.
Okay. So, right, we should be on Kaf Hay today, right?
Right.
Okay. So let's actually, okay. Okay, so just quickly to go back, we're talking about under what circumstances could one establish an individual as a Kohen. We saw one possibility was eating truma. We saw another suggestion was duchening. Okay, the Gemara is going to bring up a third possibility, which is the distribution of matnot kahuna, those gifts to the Kohen, particularly at the Goren, at the harvest field, things like that. Okay,
I think the Gemara also mentioned Truma the Rabbana and Truma the.
we're going to get to that, right? Okay, it's going to mention challah as well. Okay, all of these things that are going to come up. Can we use any of these things? So at the bottom of Okay. All right, so we said, all right. So at the very bottom of 24b, we saw the Gemara raises this point. Malin minisiyut kapayim liyochsin, hani kevan de parsa yadahu atela asik kinu. So because he does ducherin, does that mean that we raise him up his lineage? Shani hachadariya chizkiyahu. So the Gemara it said there, but maybe that implies that his lineage, this chazaka, to assume that he's a Kohen, is flawed. The ilo temahachi, if you don't say that, lamanda amar ma'alin mitruma liyuchsin, according to the one who says that the individual eating truma must be recognized as a Kohen. Kevanda achle betruma, since he's eating truma, ate la'asukinhu. Does that mean that we must raise him up? Elelav mishum deriach kaihu. That implies then that maybe his again the chazaka is flawed. And here we previously said, okay, that based on what Nehemiah had said, okay, in that case we said they couldn't eat kosher. Okay, right.
They could only eat truma, so their
Right.
chazaka was flawed.
So that maybe that was flawed. But what do we mean? On the other hand, the Gemara said that they had a strong chazaka, right? That's what it said previously. Okay. All right. So that's what the Gemara is going to start asking about on Kaf Hey Amud Aleph, right? So it says Ve'ela mai gedola chazaka. So what do we mean when we say great is this chazaka? Okay, so we're going to try to understand how, quote, I'm putting great in quotes now.
Right.
Okay, me'ikara achol b'truma d'Rabbanan. Initially, they ate truma from the rabbis, right? Rabbinic truma. Hashta echol
Because
b'truma.
in Bavel,
Right, that
it's
was in
only
Bavel,
Drabanan.
right? Hashta echol b'truma d'Oraita. Now, when they get to Eretz Yisrael, you're going to say they're going to be able to eat truma, which is the Oraita. V'ibayatema, and if you want, I would say Hashtanami. Here too in Eretz Yisrael, b'truma d'Rabbanan echol b'truma, where it might be held by some that it's only truma d'Rabbanan, even in Eretz Yisrael, because they don't all live there, all the Jewish people, right? Maybe there they're going to argue that it's only truma d'Rabbanan, even in Eretz Yisrael, the Oraita lo achil. But were it to be truma d'Oraita, they would not be able to eat. And now comes back to our original question. Can we say that from seeing somebody eat truma, we can upgrade them on their lineage to be sure they're a Kohen? But truma d'Oraita, that may only be true if we say truma is in Eretz Yisrael as a Torah mandate. But truma d'Rabbanan, lo maskinan. But with truma, that's when it's considered only d'Rabbanan, we cannot use that as proof to upgrade them. Ve'ela, but rather, says the Gemara, again, coming back to our question, my gdola chazakah. So how great is this presumption, right? The afal gav the ikela migzah. Why? Because even though it could have been possible, okay, that we might have said, lest he eat Torah truma, will make a decree prohibiting him from eating rabbinic truma, all right? Lemigzar, to make that kind of exera, mishum truma d'oraita. So we don't permit him to eat truma rabbanan, lest he eat truma d'oraita, lo gazrina. We could say we don't make that decree, and maybe that's the great chazaka that we're going to have here. Uba truma d'oraita lo achil. But then are you saying that truma, when it were to be in Eretz Yisrael, truma d'oraita, that they could not eat it? V'haktiv. But isn't it written in the pasuk, asher lo yochlu mikodesh hakodeshim, that you cannot eat from that which is associated with the mizbeach, clearly. Okay, what happens, however? mikodesh kodashim hu delo achil. From that which is, I'm going to put in quotes, directly associated with the Mizbeach, we're saying they can't eat. Ha betruma doraita achil. That would seem to imply, however, that truma, when it's doraita, they should be able to eat it. Okay, hachikama. This is what the pasuk really tries to tell us, and what Nehemiah really had in mind. Okay, lo b'midei de'ikrei kodesh. Okay, it's not with anything that has the name kodesh, which would include truma. Okay, dichtiv, as it's written, v'chol zar lo yochal kodesh, and any non-kohen may not eat kodesh. Namely,
the pasuk is talking about
right,
truma.
right, v'lo b'midei de'ikrei kodshim, not with anything that is called kodesh, sanctified. I'll use that expression. Dichtiv, as it's written in another pasuk, ubad kohen ki tiela ishazar, and if the daughter of a kohen marries a non-kohen, he betrumat hakodoshim lo tochal. She, in regards to truma kadoshim, okay, cannot eat. So therefore, in that case, we clearly see truma is considered kadshim, and therefore that's what must be referred to when Nehemiah said kadshe kadoshim, not just from the mizbeach directly, but other items that are kodesh as well. Va'amar mar, okay, and the master said earlier, b'muram min kadoshim lo tochal. In other words, anything that is set aside as kachim could not be eaten.
Which means the chaze, the shok,
Right.
that a Kohen would get, which his wife could eat.
Right.
This daughter, this Bas Kohen, who was married to a Yisroel and goes back to her father's house, cannot eat it.
Right. Okay. Okay. New piece, Tashma, a new Braita. Chazaka lekahuna. Okay, maybe if we're still trying to explain what is this great presumption, maybe it's based on the following Braita. Chazaka lekahuna, nesiut kapayim bebavel, could be the following. Number one, that he duchens in Bavel, va'achilat chala b'Surya, and he's able to eat, he receives the chala portion in Syria, v'chiluk matanot b'krachim, and he gets the special portions of the animal in the towns. Okay, katani mihat. Nevertheless, it's taught here nesiut kapayim. It nevertheless, this Braita does tell us that it would appear that duchening should give validity to apply that the person's a kohen, based on this Braita, at least in Bavel. My lovely yuchsin. Doesn't this mean that it applies to raising his lineage, right? No, says the Gemara, the truma. No, it only applies to allow him to eat truma. Okay, v'had dumya da achilat chala katani. But isn't that similar to the eating of challah? Isn't that what it's taught? Ma achilat chala liyuchsin, af nesiyut kapayim liyuchsin. That would seem to imply that the same way we see in Surya that eating challah should upgrade to his lineage, that would seem to imply that again as a parallel, duchening should be able to be upgrading to his lineage. Again, the Gemara answers, lo, that's not the case. Achilat challah gufa letruma, that the eating of challah itself is parallel to allowing him to eat truma. Kasavar, why? Because it's every other opinion, challah bisman hazed rabbanan, because challah at this time we consider not deoraita, but derabbanan, a rabbinic enactment, rabbinic practice. Utruma deoraita. But wait a second. On the other hand, truma is a Torah mandated practice. Umaskinen, okay, michala de rabbanan, la truma deoraita. And is it possible that we can say that one upgrades from challah that is rabbinic to truma that's Torah mandated? Ukita apich. But no, this is as it was reversed, kida apich laho, as was reversed, the two of them, by Rav Huna Berei de Rav Yoshua, the Rabbanan. Okay, he reversed it. And he said his implication was chala deoraita, and that truma was the Rabbanan. That was his view. Yeah.
Reuben said before that when a daughter goes back to her father's house, she can't eat the choke.
Right.
Who can eat that originally? Only the Kohen and his wife, or the children?
Or his children and his children.
Normally the Kohen, his wife,
Yeah, and his
children.
So then the
Servants.
when daughter goes back to her father's house, she's not like she was before.
She cannot.
Wait, slow down.
Right.
Okay.
If she married a non-Kohen,
Yeah, she cannot.
and then she's divorced, okay, from him, and comes back to her father's household.
She can eat truma, but she cannot eat
But
the
I
matanas and the other.
thought she was restored to her original
Original
status. But
status.
it's not true.
Not completely.
Not completely. Only she can eat truma.
In other words, she
But-
does not get her original status. She can eat truma, but there are limitations.
There are limitations
Right.
there, right?
Okay.
And if she has a child, then she cannot even
If-
do the either.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Okay. So what happens? Tashma. Let's try another brighter, says the Gemara. Chazaka lekuhuna. Again, what is this presumptive status for the Kohen? Nisiut kapayim. Again, duchening. V'chiluk granot be'eretz Yisrael. And the fact that the Kohen gets his special portions,
His grain.
right? The grain. Okay, well, it's portions of grain
Right.
there at the threshing floor.
Right.
Okay, in Eretz
That's
Yisrael,
right.
Ubesuria, and in regards to Suria, Ubavel. Ubesuria, Ubechol Makom. Right, in other places, Sheshluche Rosh Chodesh Magi'in, and those are the neighboring areas where when they send out the messengers for Rosh Chodesh, that the messengers arrive there in person. So the Gemara says, again, according to this Braita, Nisiut Kapayim Raya, it would appear that duchening is a valid proof. Okay? Avalo chiluk ranot, but not necessarily distribution of grain portions. Okay? Ubavel Kasuria. And don't we say that Babylonia is similar to Syria? Okay? What happens? Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer. What does he say? Af Alexandria Shomatzrayim Barishona. Likewise, even Alexandria, Egypt, was originally like Syria and Bavel. Namely, there were courts there that regularly met. And that was the implication. Because there were regular courts that were involved in meeting on a regular basis.
And they could determine whether a
The
person
status-
was a Kohen.
The status of the Kohen.
Maybe that answers, but is there a priority that duchening is higher if the person duchens than you?
We saw that yesterday, only because the attitude of the Gemara was truma you could eat privately. Duchening is something done in public, and nobody generally would have the chutzpah if they're not a Kohen to go up and duchen in public. Says laughing like he knows a real masa.
I don't know. I ain't saying nothing.
Okay. We say Dai Hakima Baramiza, right? Okay. Okay, what happens? Katani Mihat Nisiyut Kapayim. The Brighter nevertheless teaches that Duchening seems to be a valid support. My lovely Yuchsin, isn't it then not for the purpose of upgrading his lineage? Lo, lechala. No, it's only to clarify that he may eat challah. Okay. Before we saw it, it was okay to tell him we could eat truma. Now we're saying challah and truma are of the same level, as you're pointing out, Ted. Okay. But wait a second, says the Gemara. Ha, dumia dechila granot katan. But don't we say that that's similar to distribution of grain portions at the granary? That's what's taught, namely, machiluk granot liyuchasin, afnesiyut kapayim liyuchasin. That would seem to imply that the same way they distribute at the granary his portions, and that upgrades him, so likewise, duchening should upgrade him, right? Again, the Gemara answers, lo, that's not the case. Chiluk granot gufa lechala. Distribution of grain portions at the granary is really almost the same as giving him challah, right? Kasavar, truma bezman hazeh, the Rabbanan, because the Tana there who shared that Braita is of the opinion that truma at this point in time is only the Rabbanan, a rabbinic practice.
I just want to add something. There are many times that a kohen cannot go up to Duchen and have a broken hand, and so forth. Therefore, he cannot go to Duchen.
Right. I did not use the example of a mum yesterday. Instead, right, Bob? I use the example if there's somebody in the assembly that the kohen doesn't like the kohen or he doesn't like them, and therefore he can't duchen to that assembly.
That's another problem.
Right. And then Rabbi Kranzler pointed out that's based on the fact that the bracha ends with ba'ahava. Okay? Right. Okay. Umaskinan mitruma de Rabbanan, lechala de oraita. And can we then upgrade from truma, which is rabbinic, to challah, that's Torah mandated? So the Gemara goes on, excuse me, to tell us, uketa ishkachinhu Rav Huna, berei de Rav Yoshua the Rabbanan. And this is what we found in, I'm going to tell you, in Machloket between Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yehoshua, and the rabbis. The Amar Rav Huna berei de Rav Yoshua, because he told us once as follows, Ashkachatinhu the Rabbanan, B'bei Rav Diyadve v'Ka'amre. I found the rabbis in the academy of Rav sitting and discussing the following. Afilu laman da amar truma bezman hazeh de Rabbanan chala deoraita. Even according to those who say that truma at this time is only rabbinic, chala is Torah mandated. Why? Shaharei Sheva Shekivshu, that during the 7 years under Joshua that they conquered the land, Vesheva Shechilku, and the 7 years that it took them to divide up the land among the tribes, right? Nitchayvu b'chala v'lo nitchayvu b'truma, that they were obligated in chala, but they were not obligated in truma. Va'amina laho ana, and I said to them, this is, of course, this is Rabbi, right, that's he was talking. Adraba, just the opposite. Afilu laman da'amar truma bezman hazed deoraita. Even according to those, sorry, who said that truma at this time is mandated by Torah, chala de Rabbanan. Chala is only rabbinic. Why? The Tanya. Because we have a Braita that says, Bevoachem el haaretz. In your, and look, it's in the plural, in your coming to the land. Excuse me. I bevoachem yachol mishenichnesu la shnayim ushlosha meraglim. If when you're coming to the land, we're talking about a situation where 2 or 3 spies came into the land. Talmud Lomar, however, we learn from the plural of the pasuk, bevoachem beviat kulchem amarti, velo beviat miktzatchem. But it's all of you coming, and not only some of you coming into, or partially coming into the land. Okay.
They weren't chayim in the Torah
Right.
until
all the nation crossed the Yarden,
right.
and entered. Exactly. V'chi askinhu Ezra, and now we go on. And when Ezra brought them up, what does it tell us? Lav kolu saluk. Not everybody came up. Right? Tashma. Listen to the following Braita now. We'll try again. Still dealing with this issue of Chazaka Gedola. Chazaka lekohanim nesiut kapayim. Again, the presumption being that for the Kohen, it's duchening, v'chiluk granot, and again, distribution of grain at the granary, ve'edut, and testimony on their status. Okay, that would be
testimony by Adam that he is a Kohen.
Right. Testimony actually on the status of the parents.
Right.
Okay, that the father is a Kohen, and the mother was fit to marry a Kohen. Okay, Edut chazakahi. So we ask the question. Now all of a sudden you're calling testimony a chazaka, a presumptive legal status. Elalav hachikama. But rather that's not what he was saying. Nisiut kapayim ki edut. Namely, the fact that he duchens in public is like a testimony. Ma edut liyuchsin, af nisiut kapayim liyuchsin. So the same way a testimony should upgrade his lineage, so likewise, duchening should do the same to upgrade his lineage. Gemara answers low. That's not the case. Edut haba'a mikoach chazaka kechazaka. A testimony that comes based on the power of presumptive status, that's still only a chazaka. Ki hahu da'ata lekami de Rabbi Ami. As in the case of somebody who came before Rabbi Ami, Amarle, and he said to him, Muchzakeni, right? Muchzakeni bazeh shehu kohen. Okay, I have a chazaka. I'm sharing the chazaka that so and so, that Sid Paris is a kohen. Okay, Amarle, he said to him, Mara'ait, what's your proof? Amarle, he said to him, Shekara Rishon b'Beit Knesset, that he got the first aliyah in the synagogue. Now notice what happens here. We could spend a whole shiur just on these few lines, but we won't do that. Okay? Bechazkat shehu kohen, that he get that first aliyah because he was the presumptive status of a kohen. Oh, bechazkat shehu gadol, or do we say that he was a wealthy balabas? Okay, or a Talmid Chacham. Okay. All right. No. So what happens? What was his further proof? Shekara acharav Levi, that Bob Brumberg got the aliyah after him.
He wasn't there. I thought there was a
Okay.
That's gonna be the next one.
All right. Okay. Right. V'ha'alehu Rabbi. Now, what happened? Given that proof, v'ha'alehu Rabbi Ami lekuhuna alpiv, and Rabbi Ami established and recognized him as a kohen based on his verbal testimony.
Wouldn't that mean that it's a bad idea to call a Levi first if there's no Kohen?
Good question, Zev. Good question. Okay, we now, but this was before they established those halach. Okay, what happened? Hahu, another story. Hahu da'ata lekame the Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Somebody came before Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Amar Le, and he said to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Muchzakeni bazeh shehu Levi. Okay, Ted comes and says, I know that Mel Greenbaum is a Kohen. Right? Amarle, he said to him, Mara Iyat, what's your proof? What did you see? Amarle, he said to him, Shekara Sheni bebeit HaKnesset, b'chezkat shehu Levi, that somebody else came with and got the second aliyah in the shul, and they called him up as a Levi. Okay? Oh, b'chezkat shehu Gadol, or was it done because he was again either a Talmid Chacham or a wealthy balabas? Okay, Shekara lefanav Kohen. No, that guy was called Levi, and the fact that the person who was called before him was Mel Greenbaum, they called him up as a Kohen.
So that's a proof that when they called him up as a Levi, he was a Levi.
He was a Levi.
Because the first one was called up as a Kohen.
Ve'alehu Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi leLeviya al piv. And Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi called him up, established him as a Levi. Okay, now what happened? A third example. Somebody came before Reish Lakish. Amar le, and he said to him, Muchzakeni b'zeh shehu Kohen. I'm sharing that a presumptive status of so and so.
Right. Establish me as a Kohen based on this other person.
Right, that's right. Establish me as the status of the Kohen. Amar, he said to him, Mara'it, what's your proof? What did you see? Amar, he said to him, Shekara Rishon B'Veit HaKnesset, that read the first aliyah. Amarle, I said to him, Ra'itiv Shechilek Al HaGranot. So Beit Reish Lakish challenged him, and he said, okay, did you see him also receive the priestly portions of grain at the granary? Amarlo Rabbi Elazar. So one of the other Talmidim, along with Reish Lakish of Rabbi Yochanan, turned to Reish Lakish and said, Ve'im ein sham goren, and if there's no granary there, but la kahuna, does that mean that does away with his status of a Kohen, of establishing as a Kohen? All right, so what happens now? The Gemara tells us another aspect of this last story. Zimnin havu, there were times that they, namely both Reish Lakish and Rabbi Eliezer, Yatve Kame the Rabbi Yochanan, that they were sitting before Rabbi Yochanan. Ata ki hamase lekame. And a similar kind of incident came before Rabbi Yochanan. Okay? Amarle Reish Lakish. And Reish Lakish asked there, in that situation, Re'itiv Shecholek al Hagoren, and asked him, did you see being distributed the food portions, grain portions at the granary? Amarle Rabbi Yochanan. And Rabbi Yochanan says to Reish Lakish, Ve'im ein sham goren b'teila kahuna, if there's no granary there, is his status of a Kohen nullified?
Are you not going to accept?
You're not going to accept this Kohen, right?
Called Kohen
because of the Aliyah,
right?
What happens? No, now notice what's the situation. Hadar chazia Rabbi Eliezer bishut. Okay, Reish Lakish turned and looked at Rabbi Eliezer rather crossly. Doesn't mean he looked at him cross-eyed. He looked at him, he was angry with him, right? Amar, and Reish Lakish says, Shamat mile debar nafch. You heard this lesson from the son of the blacksmith, namely that's Rabbi Yochanan,
Yochanan.
v'lo amart lan mishmei, and you didn't say it in his name. Okay, that's why he gave him a dirty look. Okay, now another situation as we continue. Okay, Rebbe v'Rebbe Chia. Okay, the two of them. Chad he'ela ben al pi aviv lekahuna. One raised up a son based on the testimony, the statements of the father to a Kohen. V'chad he'ela ach al pi achiv leLeviyah, and one raised up a brother based on the testimony of his brother to be a Levi. Tistayim, you need to conclude, or you may conclude, the Rebbe he'ela bein al pi aviv lekahuna, that it was Rebbe who raised up the son on the testimony of the father to be a Kohen. Tanya, as we learn elsewhere in a mission, in a Braita, Harei Sheba va'amar, the man came and said to Rebbe, Beni zeh, this is my son, v'kohenhu, and he's a Kohen. Ne'eman laha'achilo b'truma. He's believed then to feed him truma. Ve'eno ne'eman lahasio isha. But he's not believed to marry him as a Kohen to a fit woman. Divrei Rebbe. That was the words of Rebbe. Amar lo Rebbe Chia. And Rebbe Chia challenged and said as follows. Im ata ma'amino lahachilo b'truma. If you believe him, I'm going to put in quotes, well enough to allow him to eat truma, ta'aminu lahasio isha, then believe him enough to marry a woman as a Kohen. V'im iyata ma'amino lahasio isha, and if you don't believe him enough to marry a woman fit for a Kohen, lo ta'aminu lechol b'truma, then don't believe him enough to let him allowed to eat truma. Rebbe answers, Amarle, ani ma'amino la'achilo b'truma. I believe him to allow him to eat, to feed him truma, shebiado la'achilo b'truma, because it's in his power to make him eat truma. In other words, if the father says he's a Kohen, then naturally it's in his power, as his, since he acknowledged that that's his son, okay, to feed him truma. Okay, ve'eni ma'amino lahasio isha, but I don't believe him enough, okay, to marry a woman fit for marrying a Kohen. She'ein biado lahasio isha, that it's not in his power to allow him to marry a woman in the status of a Kohen. Therefore, says the Gemara, Tistayim, that therefore you need to conclude that it was Rebbe who would be the one raising the son's status. Umi de Rebbe he'ela ben al pi aviv v'kuhuna, that therefore we determine that it was Rebbe who raised the status of the son based on the father's statement, okay, to Kohen. Rebbe Chia he'ela ach al pi achiv leLeviyah, and thus it must be a Rebbe Chia that raised the status of a brother based on the testimony of the brother to a Levi. The Rebbe Chia ma'ishna ben delo dekarov hu eitzel avi, and regards Rebbe Chia, what is it? What's so unique or special? Okay, that a son, okay, not by a relative, okay, such as the father. In other words, how can you accept the testimony of a relative in this case to do so? Isn't it likewise similar in the other situation? Ach nami karov hu eitzel achiv? Isn't the brother also a relative to another brother, and therefore ineligible to give testimony. Let's go on a little bit. Okay, on the top of Kafvav, b'masiach lafi tumo, we're saying the situation occurred when he was simply talking offhandedly, in simplicity. Kiha da Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, like that which was said by Rav Yehuda in the name of Shmuel, Ma'aseh ba'adam echad, an incident with one man, Shahaya Masiach Lafi Tumo, who was sort of talking offhandedly. Va'amar, and he said to us, Zichroni kashani tinok, I remember when I was a small child, Murkav al ktefav shel Abba, and I was riding on the shoulders of my father. Okay, and you remember, by the way, long time ago we had a Gemara that talked about you'd bring a child up. The father would carry the child on his shoulders when he was going up to Yerushalayim. Okay, just a connection. Vahotzieni mi beit hasefer, and they took me out of school. Okay, vivshituni et katonti, and they removed my garment. Right, vehit biluni, and they dunked me. Okay, le'echol betruma le'erev, to be able to eat truma at night. Okay, so what happens? V'Rabbi Chia misayem ba, and Rabbi Chia finished up the incident by telling v'chaveri bedilin mimeni, and my friends, my playmates, they distanced themselves from me. Vayu korinoti, and what did they call me? Yochanan ochel chalot. Yochanan who ate challah. And that was implying clearly that he was a Kohen. Ve'elu Rabbi lekuhuna al piv, and Rabbi raised him up based on that story as a Kohen. And I think we'll stop right there. Okay. All right. So we did a little bit. Okay, and we'll do a little bit extra each day as we move ahead closer to Tisha B'Av.
Don't they usually use a Maisa Shehoya as proof?
Right.
Or, suppose 2 years from now, I'm going to say, Maisa Shehoya, I remember I used to daven in Torah